Gilbert Achcar. I want to ask you about the question of foreign intervention. As I understand it, during the Libyan uprising, you supported to a certain extent NATO military intervention or UN-supported intervention. What do you think about that now? Do you have second thoughts? What do you think of the situation in Libya? And what did you think when the left opposed any U.S. bombing of Syria after the chemicals came out?
Well, thank you for the question. I used the formula once in one of the interviews I gave as a for the balance sheet of the Libyan experience. Francis Bacon's famous saying about, slander, something will stick. You calumny, and something will stick. So I have said thousands of, let's say, dozens of times, or maybe more than dozens of times, that I never, and no one can find a line where I said I support NATO's intervention or UN intervention in Libya. And yet, you still hear the same. Whatever denial I say, whatever challenge I say to anyone to bring any sentence by me saying that, I hear the same thing. I never, what I said very clearly is that there was no, at the very beginning, when the city of Benghazi had the troops of the regime on its outskirts, and Qaddafi having done dreadful speeches about crushing the people like rats or cockroaches or whatever, that at this point, with this overwhelming military superiority of the regime and the threat of crushing a city, which is a major city, of course, as a second city in the country, at that point, for this issue around the city, the left could not come out and say no to this intervention at the time when the people in Benghazi were cheering. We saw them on television, everyone saw them, the UN vote and the intervention. That was just about this, that is, we couldn't oppose this initial phase of the intervention when the fate of the city was at stake. Once this was over, and that was a matter of very few days, I myself wrote things saying, now the slogan should be, stop the bombing, arms the insurrection. And I am definitely for giving arms to the insurrection, whether yesterday in Libya or today in Syria. I'm very much in favor of that, although I can't see the prospect of that happening. So, and on Syria, in the same, from the very start, I even made interventions in a meeting of a section of the Syrian opposition, just to explain how wrong it would be to call for direct military intervention in Syria, where you didn't have any Benghazi type of scenario anyway, and for various reasons, I don't have time to get into details, but I've explained this at length in various writings which are available on the internet, and even recently, that was also my reaction against the strikes, the strikes that the Obama administration was contemplating for Syria. I was against the strikes. I was against the strikes not for some, just knee-jerk kind of opposition to anything that comes from the United States, as some people do, and I think this is very poor politics, and I don't know who referred to this article by Trotsky where he says, if you have an uprising in say Algeria against the French, and Italian fascism for its own reasons wants to send weapons there, should we oppose that? We would be absolutely stupid if we oppose that. Not only we should not oppose that, but if ever there was a general strike in Italy, the dock workers should do an exception and let the weapons go to the uprising. So that's the way one should understand this thing. It's much more complex than this knee-jerk kind of whatever Washington says, we should say the contrary. Most of the time also having illusions about what is Washington's real position, real agenda, as is the case for Syria. So my opposition for the strikes and the rest is out of my clear conscience that the strikes that were contemplated by the United States were for Israel and not for the Syrian people. Not because they don't want chemical weapons to be used. I mean, they were used several times before the last instance, going beyond the red line. But the problem, why do they? I mean, they don't care about 140,000 people killed by conventional weapons, and they just care about 1,000 or whatever the number killed by weapons. But that's because this is a weapon which is involved in the Arab-Israel confrontation. And from that regard, those who believe that the Syrian regime is an anti-imperialist regime should have second thoughts about in seeing the way, the speed with which the regime capitulated to the threat of strikes by the United States in accepting that UN agencies and all that dismantle its chemical weapons. Contrast that with the Iranian kind of attitude at a time when everyone knows that Israel has plenty of such weapons. Not that I regret the dismantlement of the chemical arsenal of Assad, but just to point to the fact that this is one further illustration of the fact that this is a regime which, as we used to say in Lebanon, is Assad, that is lion, which is not the original name of the family, but that's a detail. A lion against its own people, against our people in Lebanon and the rest, and a rabbit against Israel.